Hey everybody, sorry for being a little delayed. We had a little technical difficulty getting set up this morning. But my name is Kate Furman and I am set up in my studio to show you a metal piercing demonstration. Here is my studio space. I'm here at 547 Perry Avenue in the village of West Greenville. I do mostly jewelry and I do drawings as well, but I'm mostly trained as a jeweler, and I teach the jewelry classes at GCCA. As long as we were able to open up, I do have a metal piercing workshop coming up in June. So if we're open and back in business, definitely check that out. It's a one-day workshop where I will teach you how to cut metal sheet. You can use that for a lot of different things, like making pendants and then just as components to other pieces. I was all set up here to use my computer, but due to the technical difficulties, give me just a second to retrade. And I'm going to turn you around. Give me 1 minute. And we should be about ready to go. So here is my workshop. Just to kind of give you a view, that was the store that I showed you a minute ago. And this is the room that I do all the work. So I have soldering station here. I have casting setups over here. I have the jewelry cleaning over here. This is my desk over there. And then a photo booth set up over there. I have a wood lathe, a couple wood tools, a drill press, metal shear, and a bunch of other tools. So you can literally learn to use all of these different tools in different ways to help you with your jewelry. But I'm going to show you something today that's just your kind of how you get started with any jewelry. And it's just metal piercing. And what that means is using a jeweler saw to cut metal sheet. So I'll kind of set you up here. And what I have set up on my desk are some sheets of silver. So this is all sterling silver. You can see I've cut pieces and parts out already. So I'm just going to show you a pretty simple couple shapes today that I can utilize to do some things that I need to do. But you can really cut any shape out of the metal sheet. So if you wanted to do something really elaborate, you can use some kind of Sharpie type marker and draw right on the piece. If you wanted to do a heart and then have a heart inside it, you can cut out the outside heart and you can cut out the inside heart. Hi, Janice. So we can kind of make pendants that way. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to build the back pieces to some settings that I'm going to make. So when I'm setting any kind of these flat stones, you actually build the whole setting out of sheet metal. So this is a piece of like 20 gauge sterling silver. So the gauge is the width this direction. And then this is the kind of the profile shape. If you're starting with piercing, I recommend using either 20 gauge or 18 gauge. If you get any thicker than 18 gauge, which is this one, it starts to be really hard to cut through it. If you get any thinner than 20 gauge, the metal starts kind of warping and it's harder to cut through it that way too. So 18 to 20 gauge is a really good kind of start area. Also, if you're just starting, I recommend using copper or brass or bronze. It's going to be less expensive than a sterling silver sheet. Obviously not jumping to gold. A gold sheet is going to be very, very, very expensive. Probably $1,000 for something pretty small. So I'm going to build some settings for these stones here. I already have one cut out. So here is a sapphire, rose cut sapphire. It's a green, so sapphires actually come in all colors. So what you have to do is cut a shape out just big enough that I can then go back and add a layer of metal, a rim of metal that will be the bezel setting. So first things first, I'm going to take my sheet metal Make sure it's the same size as the other piece, and it is. They're both 18 gauge because this is a pair of earrings. I hope y'all can hear me. Can you hear me? Can y'all hear me? Yeah, okay, good. All right, so I'm gonna take my sheet and I'm gonna actually just, if you can use the flat edge of the metal, do it. But you always wanna set up your piece pretty close to whatever edge of metal you're using so that you don't waste a lot of metal. We can even probably use a little piece of that, but I'll actually just cut it out of this so you can see the whole process. So I'm gonna go ahead and just lay this stone down on the sheet, and I'm gonna trace it so that I know where to cut. And so this line is right at the edge of the stone, so I'll cut just on the outside of the edge over here. I'd rather have room for error because I can file it down. Oh, Leslie, I'm sorry if everything gets canceled. We will definitely reschedule the class for sure for when we can do it again. So now what I'm going to use is this is a jeweler's saw. This is kind of your most traditional tool for metal piercing. This is the handle. So this is the bottom. The handle's at the bottom. It has all sorts of these little pieces, little areas that can adjust. So you adjust the height of the saw based on the length of your saw blade. And you can adjust it with this little screw here. And then you put your saw blades in here. So I'll show you how to do that, although I will definitely be breaking saw blades and have to do this again. So the saw blades are really, really, really tiny. You can see that. And you probably can't see the teeth. Yeah, maybe you can, actually. So they're tiny, tiny, tiny little teeth. And the teeth point like this. So they come at a downward angle. So you want them pointing out, meaning out this direction, and down, meaning towards the handle. So I'm gonna go ahead and slide the bottom of the saw blade in to this little groove, and then close it. Slide the top into the top groove, and I'm actually gonna just kind of lean against it so I can get it good and tight. And you want it to be a very taut. You're gonna hear it like a drum. And now the teeth are pointing out and down this way. So when we're sawing, we're going to be doing it's very important to have a very straight up and down motion. And it's only going to cut on the downstroke because that's the way the teeth of the saw blade are pointing. The saw blades come in lots of different sizes. I use the 2/0, so it's 2-0 as my typical one. And when they start getting smaller than that, you can get more detailed piercing. If you get bigger than that, it's less detailed but less likely to break. So they do break really, really frequently. Something else you can use, it's not a have to, but you can use burr life. And all this does is it just kind of helps make it a smoother cut and takes the chatter out, is what their quote is. And the chatter is the noise that's made when you're cutting the metal. So I just run the blade right along the wax. And then when I'm gonna cut here, and this is called my bench pen, and I'm gonna start cutting, and I'm gonna be going up and down, straight up and down. And I'm gonna follow the line just to the outside of my line. And I can kind of blow the dust off every so often. So as you're turning the blade, it's really important that you're moving it up and down. If I just turn this blade, it's gonna snap the blade in half and I'll have to replace it. As long as you're moving the blade up and down, you can make turns. This is a really simple turn. You can do very elaborate things too. Once you get close to the edge, be really careful not to have your fingers back here, because if when you hit that end, it's going to pop forward, and I've seen some pretty nasty cuts. When we get close to this edge, the little piece is going to fall off, so you can go ahead and hold it if you want, or just let it fall and get it off the floor. Another thing, when I was sawing, if I was sawing this piece of metal, I'm trying to use the whole saw blade. And what that does is it wears the whole thing down at the same rate. So if you're just doing this, it's going to wear that blade down right in the middle, and then it's going to snap right there. So if you just do the whole blade, it'll last longer. So what I ended up with is this little shape, and it has pretty jaggedy edges here. So what I'm going to use is a little tiny tool that helps hold it, so I can file. So I have this wooden tool, and it has these kind of felted ends or leather ends so that it doesn't ding into the metal. And I'm going to hold it here, and I'm going to hold it down, put this piece in the bottom, and what that does is just saves my hand from premature arthritis, which I'll probably get anyway. So now we're going to use jeweler's files. So the files come in all different shapes and sizes. This is kind of a regular file. This is a half round file, so it's the profile of it's half round. There we go, right there. There's also needle files in all different shapes and sizes, so you can get into little crevices. There's round ones and square ones and triangular ones, and so you want all of them because every shape's different. Now I'm going to file against this bench pen. So the file works in a similar way to the saw in that it files on the forward stroke here. So I'm going to be kind of filing pretty much parallel to my bench pen and perpendicular to the edge of the metal that I'm filing. So I'm going to go forward, and if you kind of do this like long sweeping motion, it will get more surface area rather than like that will just kind of make it a little jaggedy. So if you do a nice like long motion here, it's going to get the whole surface area a lot faster. And all we're doing is just trying to make this curve a nice smooth shape and get off any hard edges. And you can come back and like knock the ends down if you want. You know, this corner is very sharp, like draw blood sharp. So I'll kind of go around it, try to smooth it down. With jewelry, it's always good. Be feeling it, be touching it, making sure that it's not too sharp. Let's turn it around this way. And we can get this edge. So this edge is actually going to be a little bit more round. So I can come back and I can take that whole corner down and make it round. It's a lovely noise. You're going to learn to like that one. Kind of like being in the dentist's office. So you can also, you can see now I'm going perpendicular to the edge of the metal this direction, but I'm still bracing this hand against the bench pen. And that's just so that I can get support. Because metal is, it's metal, it's hard. You have to really push into it to get it to file. If you're just barely pushing, you're gonna be filing all day. You wanna really like push. And then you can keep rotating it as you get around the shape. Get in that little corner. So, we're getting pretty close to where it would be. But that's kind of the basic shape, so I can check it with my stone. And see, yep, it fits. There's enough room for me to solder the bezel. So the bezel is gonna be a really thin piece of metal that I'll form around it and solder it and then eventually fold over the stone. But you still have to cut the back shape first. So, but let's say we're not making a stone and we're just making a pendant. The way you would, let's just say that you wanted to cut out the inside of something. You could, this is just a piece of metal that I'd already punched things out of, but if I wanted to take one of these circles and turn it into a different shape from the inside, all I would do is undo the top of my saw. So the top edge is loose, but the bottom is still locked in. And then slide it through. Hook it back. So now I have through this piece. So this hole, I could have gotten this hole with a drill press. That's why we have the drill press. You could do a tiny hole. It just has to be big enough that the saw blade can run through it. But then it's just, you know, if you were trying to make this shape something different, I could come in now and cut out from the inside. So now I have like a different little shape. So I'll take it, and then you have to undo it, take it off, pull it out. When you're sawing, you most likely, especially when you're learning, or, I mean, even when you're not learning, because these are really thin and they wear out, you're gonna break your saw blades. When that happens, all you do is it'll break right in half, and you just take it off the top, you take it off the bottom, and you replace it with a new one. So it's really easy. Let me see, I'll do one more little demo. Let's do like maybe a little bow or something on this little sliver that I have here. Actually, I don't really want to just experiment on silver, so I'm going to experiment on the copper instead. So this is a thinner sheet of copper. It's probably 20 gauge. The piece that I was cutting on was 18 gauge. Again, the gauge is this thickness here. So if I wanted to do like an oval for a pendant, you can use the template to draw it better, but if that was kind of the shape I wanted. I'm going to cut this little piece off with a shear, and I'll be right back over. Sorry, it's easier to cut when it's flat like this. And then I'm going to hook my saw blade back. Put the burr life on it. Now I can just cut out this shape. So again, I'm always moving. I'm always sawing up and down when I'm turning. So you notice how I had a drawing on there and now it's gone because my fingers wiped it off. I'm going to show you what another idea you can do to keep that from happening. So now I have a little oval. So what I could do is file this oval nice and round, and then I could drill a little hole, put a jump ring, maybe stamp an initial in it, and then have a little initial pendant. I could have cut this out to be like a leaf shape, and I could have had a leaf pendant. But another option is you can tell on the end of this piece of metal that there's some paper glued down to it. And what you did is if you have an image on a piece of paper, or you print an image out from the computer, or you draw a shape on a piece of paper and you want to use that exactly as it is, you can use rubber cement and rubber cement that paper down to your sheet metal, let it dry for a couple minutes, and then you can just saw it out, and that way you follow the lines and they don't disappear. And then at the end, it just peels right off, like really easily, like that. So that's a great way to transfer an image if you have something really specific you want to do. So once you get, in the next step, you get your piece cut out, you file down the edges, and then you would go back with sanding papers. So sanding papers, I recommend starting with a 220 grit, and then going to a 320 grit, and then a 400 grit, and then a 600 grit. And then from there, you can keep going finer and finer, or you can use a flex shaft, a polishing tool, something else. But there's different ways to do the sanding papers, but you always want to hold it down, brace it down on your bench pen, and you can do like swirling, or you can kind of see how it's giving a nice satin kind of finish. You can also, if you're trying to get something really smooth and trying to get all the gross scratches out, what you can do is take your 220 grit, which is going to be your more gritty one, and then go one direction. Do the whole thing that one direction. And then, once you get all the scratches out, you can get out that direction, you take the 320 grit, and then you turn it, and you go the other direction. So now you're crossing the first lines. So you keep going until all the lines from the 220 are gone. You'll do the whole piece this way. And then you would take the 400 grit, and you cross it back the other direction. And then you take the 600 grit and cross it back the other direction. And that's just kind of a nice trick to make sure you got all the scratches out. And then you're also going to want to hit the edges. So you're going to make sure they're all nicely finished, nicely sanded, and get it to where you want it. And then one last thing I'll show you is if you have a piece, and we're just cutting out a flat sheet metal, so for example, for the workshop I'll be teaching at GCCA, whether it's canceled again because of coronavirus, but we'll have it again in the future. But if we're just making little simple pendants that are going to be flat, so you make your piece and you have, it's just, you cut out like a key shape, or you cut out a leaf, or you cut out a dog head, or whatever it is, but you want to give it just a little bit more dimension. You can take these files and you can actually file in what's called a bezel. A bevel is what holds the stone. A bevel is an angle. So if you instead of holding the piece directly perpendicular to your bench pen to get that flat, I can hold it at an angle and then come across it with my file. And that's going to give me that bevel or a knife edge. And then, you would then want to come back and make sure this wasn't too sharp. So you would knock it down with your files, you knock it down with your sandpapers. But what it does, it gives you just a little bit more dimension. So it can give the illusion that something is a little bit thicker, a little bit rounder than it actually is. There's also all sorts of different ways to texture the metals. We can roller imprint textures in them. You can hit them with hammers. There's chasing tools with different ends that you can hit to get different textures. This is like a chasing tool with just a flat end. I actually made all these tools when I was in college, but you can buy sets of them too. And you can buy sets that have letters or numbers or stars or hearts or whatever too. But to do a chasing tool, you would put it against a piece of metal and this is a chasing hammer, and it has this little kind of rounded end. The way to hold these is you hold the hammer in the palm of your hand, and then it's a loose movement because the weight of the hammer is going to be doing all the hammering. So if I was going to do just some texture, I could do or I could try to do a long line, whatever it is, but That way you can kind of, again, it's another way to make your flat metal look more interesting. So I think that's gonna kind of your introduction to piercing. Again, in our workshop, we'll go in a lot more depth with it, and we'll be able to make pendants or even earrings that you can just go ahead and wear. It's kind of instant gratification. So if you are planning on taking the workshop, be thinking about shapes that you might want to cut out. What do you want your pendants to look like? You can see here, I cut out a leaf shape out of this piece. Actually, it was a pair of earrings. So this is the piece that's left over after I cut out the backing for some stones. But sometimes you can even use the piece that's left over as something. So you can plan on using the positive and the negative of the shape. And that way you can have two pieces. Or maybe you have an earring, one's the positive and one's the negative. So there's all sorts of cool things you can do with it. And even these flat sheets can be kind of turned over and tabbed together, so you can roll them and bend them together so that they hook together. So maybe you roll that end, and then you roll this end, and then you hook them together and make like a chain. So there's so many things you can do with just a flat sheet of metal. And this is something you can set up at home. This is a jeweler's bench. So this piece comes attached to here. I can take this out and swap it with other tools. But really all you need is a piece of metal, a piece of wood, like this, which is a bench pin, a clamp, a big metal clamp, some kind of table that you don't mind working on, hook them down together, and then you have a place to work. So it's pretty, you can set it up at home pretty easily. You need, the saw blades, which come in bundles. They're called bundles, and they have a whole bunch of them. And you just take them out one at a time as you're using them. And then you can kind of get started. So it's definitely something that once you get the basics, you can keep doing and make all your gifts and kind of go from there. But I really appreciate y'all watching, and sorry I got off to a late start. I was all set up to have my computer working, but it decided not to work last minute. But I hope this all worked just as well. And if y'all have any questions, it seems that I have a little bit of a delay from when y'all ask them, but if you have a question, please ask me now, or you can always message me. My email is kate@katefurman.com, and my website is katefurman.com. If you stay tuned, I think in June, I'm having a brand new website launching. It's going to be so awesome. I can't wait. So definitely check back in June at least. And Janice, thanks for watching the demo. Thank you all for watching the demo. And I hope that you're all staying safe and healthy, and that I get to see you all soon. All right. Bye, guys. Thanks.